Colonel, you first. Why is Ron Paul wrong?
I think the devil's in the details. I mean, what Ron Paul does is take a large knife and scrapes everything off the top. Says no more of this, no more of that. His blaming of us for 9/11, his capture of bin Laden instead of killing him, those type of things, to me, are outrageous. We're in the middle of a war, oh, by the way, and it's not going away soon. And Ron Paul's talking about the way he does in very dramatic, oversimplified form is
But you
not
critics
helpful.
oversimplify too. You say, oh, he's ridiculous, disastrous. And it seems like he's saying we spent $700 billion. We are making some enemies with our actions. Well, I'll let you make the case.
Well, first of all, I want to disagree with what Colonel Hunt said in his second point about Ron Paul, and that is that he blames us for 9/11. He really doesn't. He's been very careful about that.
He says one of the reasons we were attacked is because and Osama bin Laden said, because we have troops in Saudi Arabia.
That's right, and he wasn't the only one.
Okay.
Paul Wolfowitz, Deputy Secretary of Defense, in an interview in May 2003, said that the great thing about getting troops out of Saudi Arabia was that it's been a huge recruiting device for al-Qaeda. That's a quote. So in other words, Wolfowitz admits one of Ron Paul's main points, and Wolfowitz is one of the neoconservatives who pushed for the war in Iraq.
Isn't it one of the reasons they attack, that people attack us? We have troops in their country?
First of all, the issue of why 3,000 Americans got killed has little to do with Saudi Arabia and everything to do with Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda. The problem is we've got a guy running for president of the United States who's getting poll numbers, who oversimplifies a foreign policy and a military policy in a time of war. Of course we need adjustments. Of course there have been mistakes. But this stop all investments, stop help with Israel, cut this defense budget, close all these bases is beyond ridiculous, particularly in the middle of a war.
All right, well, let's do them one at a time. Close all these bases. We have 300,000 soldiers around the world, 60,000 in Germany, 30,000 in Japan, South Korea. Why?
First of all, there's treaties involved, and there are defense issues. Yes, we should reduce, of course. I'd like to bring a lot of our soldiers back, spend more time in the U.S. But there are places like North Korea, like South Korea, and in Southeast Asia that we need it because of our positions in the world.
Why?
Pardon?
Why can't they defend themselves?
First of all, some of them are training. Some of them are like with the South Korean, because of what happened in North Korea. So we would be involved. I mean, we don't want to have to deploy back over there because North Koreans are so belligerent.
South Korea's gross domestic product is 40 times that of North Korea. They can defend themselves. You're making a good point that there's a treaty. You can end treaties. Treaties can be ended. And in fact, the South Korean president, when Bush was in office, asked if we could finally end the war. It hasn't ended yet.
But the North Koreans, David, have more artillery combined than anyone in the world. And within 32 miles of 40 million people in Seoul.
True.
So we're there to help our friends. Whether it could be smaller, sure. The problem I have is Paul says, cut them, bring them all home.
Okay.
That's my problem.
All right, the point. Okay,
Second point. He says cut foreign aid. Cut it to Israel, cut it to Egypt. What's wrong with that?
Cut it to everyone to zero.
Cut it to everyone to zero.
Israel, first of all, won't exist. And
why wouldn't they exist?
Because we have a phenomenal amount of billions of dollars to Israel, is helping them stay in.
$3 billion a year. It's 1.5% of their gross domestic product.
The U.S. government funding and training and intelligence work is essential, that, according to the Israelis and to others, that they exist. Paul would say, stop it. I think it's.
He does say stop, but he would also stop it to Egypt and Jordan, right? And it would be even.
He wants everybody. See, Congressman Paul wants everything stopped, and that's my issue with him. Yeah. It's not a reasonable approach to anything.
Okay, but the point is the Israelis are going to say they want the aid because people who get things for free want those things. That doesn't mean that without it they would not survive. There's a sustained case for non-intervention that many political scientists, some economists have made, and it's a very strong case.
How do you make that case, for example, 9/11? How do you make the case for not responding?
Well, Ron Paul says we should have attacked them after 9/11. That was a reason to retaliate.
Part of the upset that led to 9/11 was U.S. foreign policy. If you stick your hand in hornets' nests, hornets are going to bite.
You also can't sit in your house and wait for the hornets to attack to keep that going.
All right, so let's talk about Iran then. We're now sitting in the house. They're building a nuclear device.
Maybe.
Probably.
Okay, probably.
Rick Santorum says we should bomb them before they do it.
He's as wrong as Congressman Paul.
We
cannot do a third war in 10 years. And by the way, wouldn't be successful.
Congressman Paul says, look, we can live with it then. What are our choices? Either we bomb them or we can live with it. We live with the Soviets. We can live with them.
The problem we have is Iran's stated policy of destruction of Israel and the killing of Americans in Iraq and the association they have with Iraq. It's a very dangerous and unsettling country who openly supports Hamas and Hezbollah. Iran is a terrorism state. And it's very difficult to let them have the
But Colonel, you've lived most of your life, and I've lived all my life in a world in which two countries had thousands of nuclear weapons aimed at each other. The idea that Iran could get a couple of nuclear weapons and aim them at Israel, which has over 100, and somehow not face retaliation is absurd. The Israelis have second strike capability with 3 nuclear-armed submarines.
David, that leads to World War III. That's my issue with Iran and Iran.
And that's why they won't do it.
So if we're not going to go and take them out, we have sanctions. I don't see that we have many options. It's a country much bigger than Iraq.
Iran is a superpower in the Middle East. They dictate a lot.
So what are we going to do?
There's economic. There's pressure, religious pressure. There's Chinese. There's Soviet. There's an awful lot we can do that would economic that we're not doing. The last thing we should be doing or even talking about is a war with Iran. Oh, by the way, bombing Iran's nuclear facilities. They're so buried. It would need nuclear capability.
Okay, we agree on that. But let me just bring up, if Ron Paul is, as you and so many Republicans say, just so wrong on this, how come he gets so much support, as we'll see here, from military families?
I get twice as much money from the active military duties than all the other candidates put together. So they're saying that I'm on the right track. They're sick and tired of those wars. They're sick and tired of the nation building and the policing activity.
He got 71% of the money from military families, more than John McCain in the last election.
Yeah, first of all, the military is not a voting bloc. And because a man sends...
But what do they know that they're supporting him?
No, but it's because when somebody's in the United States military, Army, Marines, all of them, that is not... Therefore, they're always, first of all, right. Or secondly, that because you get support from them means that you're right. It's a nice thing to say, I've got a lot more military guys. That doesn't mean, therefore, everything I'm saying, because the military is backing me individually, I'm right.
Oh, absolutely. It's just a really important and interesting indicator.
Yeah.
That people, when they get to vote with their money, which is one of the biggest votes you do, are voting for Ron Paul.
What do you mean get to vote? Oh, give money.
In other words, it's one thing to say, oh, I like someone. It's another thing to pull out your wallet and actually give them money.
But you're cherry picking. We don't know, for example, with Sergeant Jones, who sends $10, which part of the policy he supports in Paul, and what the governor does.
Okay. Let's take one other controversial part. He says stop spying.
Close the blinds, dig a hole. I get it. Of course, you can't stop spying. In fact, we got to do a lot more aggressively spying. It's a very dangerous world. How it got there can be argued, but we are in the middle of a war on very, very bad guys, and you have to have some idea what they're doing. From my standpoint, we have to actually be doing more, not less. You can't dig a hole and bury yourself in it, which is what the congressman wants us to do.
David Henderson.
I think this kind of whether you need spying depends on whether you're going to be going to wars. If you need wars, you need spying. And I'm just saying, how do you reduce the probability? He and I agree that you can't reduce the probability to zero. So how do you do it best? I say it's by not upsetting those people in those other countries, by intervening in their countries, intervening in their affairs, telling them how to do it. By the way, even though Colonel Hunt and I agree on not going to war with Iran, in fact, sanctions, the kinds of things the United States government is pushing, really are a first step towards war, and it's very nervous-making.
So, but you got to do something. That's my problem with the Paul and his supporters. It's do nothing.
Well, do something means trade, means talk.
Well, but to try, you have to try to effect in some manner, whether it's intelligence or economic, people who have stated. And, in fact, have killed Americans, as Iran has, and have stated the destruction of your friends, the Israelis. You just can't sit there. It's disingenuous, and it's oversimplification, which is my biggest argument with the congressman.